Politicians are going to do what politicians are going to do. Often it doesn't make sense to me personally, but in this case, I really cannot say that this makes sense at all. I mean, how actually could it be possible for the American government to take their citizenship away? That just doesn't sound right. Some of you may have heard recently about Senator Bernie Moreno from Ohio, originally from Colombia, who has put forward a bill that would restrict an American's ability to hold more than American citizenship. And I think it's important for us to be able to discuss this topic. I'm Rafael Di Furia. This is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. Just to kick off this episode, I will start off by saying, for those of you who might be new to the channel, just for a little bit of context, I'm somebody who is a dual citizen. I have dual US and Italian citizenship. I live in Europe and have lived in Europe for full-time for quite a while now. I have many strong opinions when it comes to immigration and citizenship, and there are some things about this particular bill that just do not make sense to me. Since this news has come out, many dual citizens across the globe, including in the US as well as outside of the US, have been very concerned about what could be coming. But I will say, just overall, to get this started with, I personally don't think that this, in its current form, has any way of being able to go forward. For those of you who are subscribed to the Italian Citizenship Assistance YouTube channel, I spoke with Marco Permunian this week about this topic, and he spoke with his American partners who also don't believe that this has a real standing and actually could go against the Constitution, as well as the Supreme Court ruling. In short, basically it was saying that someone cannot be stripped of their American citizenship, but you kind of also have to think about it in a couple of different ways, because technically there are two U.S. citizenship tiers. You're a citizen either way, but it's depending on how you're recognized. So for example, you can be a constitutional citizen recognized by being born in the country, naturally born as a U.S. citizen, or that you become a naturalized citizen of the nation. However, if you are a U.S. citizen born abroad, you would be fully American, but your citizenship would be recognized by Congress and not the Constitution itself. And if you go onto Senator Moreno's website, it very clearly makes this emotional argument. And I would say, for me personally, when we are talking about how, if you're going to have divided allegiance and that you're going to be not able to really commit fully to one or the other based on what passport and what citizenship it is that you have, is one of the most absurd and silly arguments in this day and age that a person could have. If we were talking about maybe 100 years ago, maybe. If we're talking about a few hundred years ago, okay, we're talking about a different world then. But in this day and age, I mean, often I do get asked the question, both in private messages as well as sometimes in comments, well, where's your allegiance? If you had to choose one country and could only choose one, if the US and Italy were to go to war, what would you choose? And I feel very fortunate to be in the situation that I can say that I don't see that as a realistic possibility that could happen. Italy doesn't particularly have any stores of oil that might be of interest. Unless we're talking about olive oil, then maybe that could be a thing, although I think these days actually Italy gets a lot of olive oil from Spain, at least the olives. Different topic for a different day. There's a whole underground black market of passing off Italian oil cut with Spanish olives. Insert Godfather music here. And even though they are cherished national treasures, I do not believe that pizza nor pasta would be enough for a country to be invaded. Could it be worth it? Are they good enough to invade? Maybe. They are delicious and quite yummy, but I don't see how any governmental body would put military expenditure towards that sort of thing. If I were running for office, would this potentially be a possibility that could exist at some point in the future? Maybe you should be glad I'm not a politician. If I were president, would I? Maybe. Be glad I'm not president. I have priorities, and pizza might be one of them. But getting back onto the topic, on Senator Moreno's website, he mentions that one of the greatest honors of his life was when he became an American citizen at 18, the first opportunity that he was able to do so. And it was an honor to pledge an oath of allegiance to the United States of America and only the United States of America. Being an American citizen is an honor and a privilege. And if you want to be an American, it's all or nothing. It's time to end dual citizenship for good. I could not disagree more. It has nothing to do specifically with the passport that you have. But in a country like the US, where, yes, it can be a bit of a melting pot at sometimes, but there are still those roots that people hold on to from their individual backgrounds, Polish, Irish, Italian, and even more recently, maybe you have people coming from, I don't know, Australia or Brazil or wherever that might be. In many cases, it's not going to divide a person's allegiance. Are there going to be situations where it could? Yes. But if we're talking about passports and citizenships, in many cases, it's not going to make a difference because, say, for example, you end the ability for someone to hold another citizenship. They might still very well hold on to an allegiance to a foreign nation. I mean, think about it. Just simply that someone has a family tie to another country could be enough. It doesn't necessarily even matter what that nationality would be. It could be European, African, Asian, anywhere. It's not going to change how a person might feel about the building blocks that might make up who they are. And in a situation maybe where someone's allegiance might be called into question, that they might actually be committing an act which would go against the US government and be one of the few acts that could cause someone to have their citizenship revoked. For example, fighting in a foreign army against the US or serving in a foreign governmental body. For example, if someone has an allegiance to a foreign power and they truly have ill will and ill intentions towards another nation, and I'm not speaking about the US or any country specifically, name 2 countries at random, and if, for example, that person has a divided allegiance, they're going to commit whatever act they might, regardless of what passport they may have that is valid or invalid, or whatever citizenship that they may hold or not hold. It's about mentality. It's about where the person sits, because a person can hold multiple passports and multiple citizenships and still have love and respect and be grateful for each of the nations that they can call their own. For some, it could be the same as saying, oh, which of your parents is your favorite? You just love maybe your parents each in a different way. Yeah, some people might actually love one parent and hate the other. That does happen. But there could also be situations where you're going to have this deep connection to both of them, that it's not one is better than the other. There's just a difference in the way that you relate to each of them. There are different feelings that you have for both of those parents or for each nation. Each person is going to have their own way relating to it. But also, I can't help but have the question, since Senator Moreno is originally from Colombia, I can't help but wonder, if he's put forward this bill, does he back up his words with his actions, and has he already renounced his Colombian citizenship? Because Colombia is one of the nations that does seem to allow for dual nationality. So is that something that he's already given up? And if he has given it up, I will definitely say respect will be given where it's deserved, that if a person backs up their actions with their words, that definitely deserves some form of respect, even if I completely disagree with the person. Because there are a lot of people out there who just simply do not back up their words with their actions and are interested in putting out potential laws that only really might sound good and might only just kind of get people riled up and people excited about whatever their political movement is. But even if you go onto Senator Moreno's website and go to look at the PDF that's on senate.gov, when you start looking at the terms that are kind of put into place, it's interesting that a person would have 1 year to make this declaration if this would go through, which I don't personally think it could. The person would basically have a year to be able to renounce either their American citizenship or their foreign nationality or nationalities. But in the case where someone might not go through the process of doing that just by automatic non-compliance, that the US would recognize that this person has automatically given up their nationality. And I'll admit, when I saw this part, as someone who has briefly looked at the idea of what it would take to actually renounce US citizenship, I might have gotten a little bit excited at the possibility, because renouncing US citizenship is just an expensive of enough process to do that, for me personally, it doesn't make sense. And I left the US a long time ago, so I don't necessarily have a need for US citizenship. And being an American citizen while living abroad can come with some annoyances. I've spoken about it in previous episodes before, but I was thinking, hey, if there were a way that I didn't have to pay a few $1,000 to not have to actually go through this and not have to go through interviews and going in person to have those interviews, hey, that would be a great way of saving some time. But for my friends and family who would want to hold on to their citizenships, I mean, I know this would be a horrible thing. It just made me laugh in the moment. As someone who knows that doing something like this would be very difficult, if not impossible to do, it made me laugh in the moment, almost have a little smile that, man, this could be a great way of saving a buck or two. Well, not a buck or two, but a few $1,000. Sounded really interesting, but when it comes to the reality of this, I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see people be forced to renounce another citizenship, to be forced to renounce their own American citizenship, to connect with the nation that maybe they're from, to connect with the nation that maybe has welcomed them. That to me would be very sad. And however, is there maybe a reason to create a framework for new citizens? I think there could be a discussion that you could have there. And I realize that is definitely going to be a controversial thing to say. But if you are going to make some sort of change, and there has to be a change that could be made, maybe that would be the place. However, there doesn't have to be a change made at all. This is completely unnecessary. There are many greater issues that the country has to deal with, that the world has to deal with. When I see politicians coming up dealing with issues like this that don't have to deal with actual daily problems that people deal with, that's when I get a little bit frustrated. And that's when I start to think that maybe some of the decisions that are being made aren't the best. And that maybe rather than going after a non-issue, maybe it's worthwhile going after something that actually is going to make a big difference in people's lives. Maybe, just maybe, that could be worthwhile to lift up the country. But of course, we must stand with our politicians, support them in everything that they do, and know that they are leading the way, that we have voted in the brightest minds for our future. And be thankful that individuals like me with pizza priorities are not in the government leading pizza-based propositions, putting a pizza on every American's dinner table, making sure that the pizza is for the people. If you were to say that maybe this law could apply to Americans who naturalize as new citizens and create a whole new category there, maybe that's one thing, but then we have to start talking about maybe the Supreme Court stepping in, and a bill like this, I don't think would have enough power to be able to do that. And I mean, if we're talking about the Supreme Court being able to step in and overturn something from the past, I mean, recently we saw Roe versus Wade, that being overturned. So could it be possible that something like that could happen in the future? Maybe. But do I think that's realistic? No. I mean, if you look from the top down, the current president has a wife who's a dual citizen. His youngest son is a dual citizen. And I think that no matter who would be president, regardless of what position that they might take, I can't help but imagine that whoever would be the current sitting president would not want to do anything to make their marriage unhappy or more unhappy. Because realistically, being a president of a nation definitely can't be easy, and I can't imagine how easy it would be to have a happy marriage in that sort of situation. But even though the Supreme Court is not the president's not the Supreme Court, yeah, maybe there are influences, there are pressures, or whatever can happen between them. So it's not to say that if a president doesn't have an interest in something that it wouldn't happen. But I think in general, there are enough politicians in the US and enough American citizens who are dual citizens who would not be okay with this, that it would, even if you didn't have a constitutional or a Supreme Court question in place, would still put up enough of an argument against this that it would be difficult potentially to get it through. Could this potentially be a bill that could set up some sort of framework for the future? I would doubt that in some ways. I know there is a growing sentiment in the US to maybe get rid of dual citizenship. And there are reasons from the left and the right why that might be. But I do think there are many cases where dual citizens are able to be a bridge between nations and to be able to help guide good relationships between two nations. So you could maybe say that there could be a potential loss if the US were to lose its dual citizens and the ability to have dual citizenship. For me personally, I can't say it would affect my life all that much because effectively on a day-to-day basis, I live as an Italian citizen. I only ever have need for that citizenship in my life. But I know that there are many people out there who, for practical reasons, need to remain connected to their country. They need to go back because of their families, because of their friends, because of their lives that they built there. I left before I had that chance to really build up that part of my life. And I have very few family members that are still left in the US. So I might not have those same connections to have the need to go to the US. But one of the other reasons why I have kept my citizenship all these years is because I'm very grateful for the country that I grew up in. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I had. I'm very grateful for having had that be a part of my life. The country may be imperfect, and there might be a lot of things that do not go so fantastically. But having had that experience that I did, that does give me a bit of pride in that identity of being an American. Even if I'm not the most American guy out there, and even if I left long ago, and even if I don't have an interest in living there, I'm very grateful to be able to remain connected to that country. And at the same time, I'm also very grateful for my Italian citizenship, for my Italian nationality, and what that allows me to do, and where that has allowed me to live, and where it allows me to call home. But home is not just where you live, and there's a part of me that, even though I don't necessarily, in a practical sense, consider the US to be home, there's still that feeling that it was my home, that it is still a homey feeling in a sense. Because like I said before, I've been asked, well, if you had to choose between one and the other, who would you fight for? Or what would you do? And I again feel very grateful to say I live in an era where this is not a real concern. And not only do I live in a time period where that doesn't seem so realistic, but the two countries I happen to be a citizen of are actually pretty friendly with each other. If maybe the two countries that I had citizenship to were against each other, maybe there could be different feelings there. But as it stands, I happen to be a citizen of two countries with a great relationship between them, and I'm very happy to see that relationship between them. You can question the leadership, you can question politicians, but when two countries can have a good relationship with each other and be peaceful and friends, I think there's something to be said for that. But I'm going to get off of my soapbox here and say thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Of course, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. If you agree with me or if you disagree with me, let me know why. The conversations in the comment section below are always fascinating to me. Even if I'm not always able to respond to each and every comment, I always love to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you to those of you who do take part in the conversation down below in the comment section. And of course, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible on a monthly basis through rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, patreon.com/Rafael Di Furia, and the one-time support through the thanks button on YouTube. Of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I will see you all next time. Later.